Coming out of the NFL owners meetings, there is Browns news. There are league changes. And off of free agency and before the draft, what are some fantasy football grades? What are some ups and downs we should be looking for so you can win maybe a fantasy football championship ring? We'll get to that and a whole lot more. Right now, we're live on the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara, the sickest Cleveland Browns podcast.
Chubb runs, he's to the 10, 15, he's to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's to the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Chubba Lubba Hub.
It's gonna be sick.
Hello, everybody. Yes, we are live on a Tuesday here on the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. Guess who I am? I'm Andy McNamara. We're getting rolled with some Browns news, some NFL news. Like I said, the league meetings down in Orlando were a little more interesting from a Browns perspective because it's not just the NFL owners playing golf and hanging out and all that. It's actually a chance where the local media are able to connect with the head coach of a team, with the general manager, and with the owners. And for the Browns, there was actually some more insight than let's say news, I guess, on the stadium issue. Jimmy and Dee Haslam spoke to the media, and really we've been kind of guessing for the media news where it was said that the Haslams were interested, have not purchased, but were interested in 176 acres in Brook Park, which would lead us to believe that the stadium, a new stadium, a domed stadium, or an inside facility, or whatever you want to call it, would be moved to Brook Park instead of in downtown Cleveland. And really what they revealed was both are on the table. Either a $1 billion refurbishment to the current stadium or a whole big brand new facility at Brook Park. Now, personally, being someone who travels to a game or two a year, I love the downtown core. I love that you're able to walk to the stadium and everything is close by. But really, if you want those big events, if you want WrestleMania, if you want the Taylor Swift concerts, if you want some events that can go on when the weather's not good, you need a roof on the place. And the roof is not going on that new place. So it seems it's either redo to whatever it looks like, the current stadium, or have a whole new facility at Brook Park, which I would think also would be new restaurants, some hotels, a whole new campus for the Browns. And you shuttle yourself from downtown, I guess, right? But I want to know from you, do you want the stadium, after Jimmy and Dee Haslam said, look, right now, it could be either or. Do you want a new stadium at Brook Park, more space, inside, don't deal with the cold, bigger events, close to downtown, but not downtown, or refurbishment, keep it as is, except spruce the old girl up a little bit and see what happens there? Let me know in the comment section. Click subscribe, notifications on, click like, share the link. But let me know, where do you want that stadium? For me, look, I don't like the cold. I don't like bad weather. I map out my Browns games trips in September, October before the cold comes, right? And I'd still probably prefer that because you get to walk out and all that. But I think an indoor facility with the roof would be cool. So I'm going to say I'd like the Brook Park one to happen with the roof, but ultimately, hey, you know what? If it's a case where they decide not to, because it would have to be more of the Haslam's money, it would be double the $1 billion, be $2 billion, and more of the Haslam money, and then you redo it. Then, hey, you know what? It's fine. I'm not too concerned either way on it. But let me know which way you are. Follow us on Twitter at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81. And there's some Browns news coming out of the free agency side. We're going to bring in Dan Toomey, my guy from Dynasty Nerds. Right now, he's a proud new papa, and he's joining us while his newborn is having a little nap. So we appreciate Dan coming up, taking some time with us right now. Does a great job at Dynasty Nerds. Dan, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Andy. Again, I feel like it's been too long since we connected about Browns talk.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on the new Browns fan to the family.
Thank you.
Lots of fun there. And really, before we get to the free agency part, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, more news coming out of their interviews is that imminent extensions to Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Not a surprise, but nice to hear.
Yeah. I guess having consistency is a little different for the Browns organization right now.
Yes.
Can you think of the last coach and GM combo that we had discussions of contract extensions like simultaneously? Like are you going back to the Bill Belichick era? With that, it's nice having consistency because if you think about it from just running a company standpoint, you put systems in place to operate your company a certain way, and keeping those systems the same year over year helps build that consistency, helps repetitions, and helps build a winning culture. Where if you're just ripping off the Band-Aid every 2 years and you're doing things from scratch now, not only the rookies learning new things, the veterans are learning new things, the front office personnel are learning new things. So the consistency is very nice, and it's uncharted waters almost for the Cleveland fans.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. It's been that constant turnover. And for the most part, the decision to turn over has been the right one. But unfortunately, whoever they had hired was also the wrong decision. And it was that cycle. And it's a no-brainer, whatever that extension looks like, 2-3 years, whatever. But he said, look, Jimmy Haslam said that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, along Paul DePodesta, he doesn't know of a duo or trio that gets along better in the league. And that's really what they were looking for. The Haslams hate dysfunction. They hate it. If you can't get along, they'll get you out. They're scarred from that initial pairing with Joe Banner and then Michael Lombardi. And now they're on their way. They're looking good, and we'll see how the draft goes. But the free agency and trades, the new additions to the Browns and what that means, let's get to the fantasy impact of that from a Browns perspective. And of course, the big addition was Jerry Jeudy to the team. Gave up those 5th, 6th round picks, re-upped them to a new contract. And Dan, I just want to know from your perspective, fantasy-wise, we've been teased by Jerry Jeudy. We like Jerry Jeudy coming up, but he's just never quite got there.
Yeah, so my first reaction is, like you said, Jerry Judy's been connected to the Andrew Berry front office since, God, I feel like Andrew took over the job a couple of years ago. Yeah. So him coming in finally is like a culmination of years worth of work, which signals to me that obviously I believe Andrew and Kevin have a very good relationship. Everything I see in interviews and media is, they are very cordial and very friendly with each other, which means they probably talk about everything because, they work together. Have they been talking about Jerry Jeudy for a number of years? Has, Andrew been saying I need to get this guy, and Kevin's like, oh yeah, if you get this guy, I'm going to use him X, Y, Z, what have you. Is there a plan in place already for Jerry Jeudy to slide right into this offense? Your first thought is Elijah Moore. Right. And, how does that affect Elijah Moore? But when you look at when Elijah Moore came over from the Jets, it was kind of like he was the odd man out when Aaron Rodgers brought over all of his buddies. And right. Andrew Berry does what he likes to do. He capitalized, on grabbing a player with talent for a minimal investment. So I feel like Elijah Moore was an opportunity that presented itself at the time. Mm-hmm. And now Jerry Jeudy is something that they've been trying to get for a while. So I feel like we haven't seen any practice. We haven't seen guys in pads or anything. Yeah. But is it too far to say that I feel like Jerry Jeudy is automatically placed in that wide receiver 2 position, and Elijah Moore is taking a step back? And Jeudy already got the contract extension, which that whole thing was funny the way the numbers were reported. But let's not remember, Elijah Moore is due up for new money shortly, and he's been here for a full year, and I've heard no talks about an extension for Elijah Moore. Jeudy, I'm not even sure if he got into the building before they gave him a bigger paycheck. So yeah, I feel like we're going to roll into 2024. It's going to be Coop, it's going to be Njoku, and it's going to be Jerry Jeudy, and that's kind of be your core trio of pass catching weapons. Right,
and for Elijah Moore, I love the deal when it was done, and fantasy wise, I had much bigger expectations. They never really seemed to get into a groove. Maybe that's in part because you had all those different quarterbacks playing, and we saw Elijah Moore always in motion, and then the couple times he kind of popped and he got banged up the one time and never really got in sync. Maybe if you can get Deshaun Watson healthy and playing at a high level consistently, maybe that can change. He's on that rookie deal the final year this year. But I would have to think for that amount of money that they re-upped him in the extension, that he's got to be the number 2, right? Yeah. And with the eventual upside, Dan, I think and it seems this way in Andrew Berry's mind, a number 2 with the potential to become a number 1 post Amari Cooper, who, by the way, Jerry Jeudy looks up to.
Yeah. It's you know, you call it, you know, same school scouting, but you know, obviously both guys went to Alabama, and you're right. Like, we have to realize in the NFL that, you know, there's always the other shoe about to drop, and the other shoe is the Amari Cooper contract coming to an end. And, you know, he is getting up there in age. So is Jerry Jeudy the succession plan to that? Who knows? You know, I do a lot of draft coverage, and you see year over year, the wide receiver class is, quote unquote, the best wide receiver class ever. And 2024, it's honestly like the deepest wide receiver class I can remember in history. And so when Cooper is ready to leave, like, do we just grab a kid out of the draft? Because now it seems like you can go into the second, even early third round and grab yourself a day one starting wide receiver. So it's very interesting the way the wide receiver market has played over the years. And you got to give Andrew Berry credit, because I believe he's always in tune with the markets. You know, when the Jerry Jeudy extension was announced, the first complaint was like, oh my God, that's so much money. But you got to realize, like, once these Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, like, extensions come in, like, that Jerry Jeudy money is going to be, you know, mid-range contract at best. So Berry is just securing that value price before it appears to be a value to most people.
And he did that with David Njoku, who at the time when he extended him was like, we like the talent, but, and then we saw Chief go off, mind you, with Joe Flacco. That's my one thing. And when we talk, let's talk real quick, David Njoku and the fantasy value for him, and where we should really look at a David Njoku in a tight end class. Dan, we say it every year, and it's going to get in the as Travis Kelce continues to decline, even if it's little by little, you know, it's real tough fantasy wide tight end. Like, if you don't get the top couple, you're in some trouble. So for David Njoku, who was having a typical Njoku season before Flacco came in, which was, it was okay. It was, he flashed and then didn't do anything and didn't get the ball. But Flacco, he did. Like, he flew out and was with Deshaun Watson a little bit. So we like that. The train, they want to get that chemistry. But where do you see David Njoku this year in fantasy with the, you know, knowledge that there's no Flacco coming?
Yeah. So with us being so early, you know, it's still springtime. Fantasy football is so far away. I always use Underdog Fantasy for my ADP stuff, because they are having drafts going on right now. So it's, you know, constantly churning, constantly updating. David Njoku is currently going as tight end 10 in fantasy football drafts, which I feel is a very, very good value based on where he finished last year. Now, yes, you're right. When Joe Flacco came in, that's when we saw the uptick in Njoku's usage. And with Deshaun, we didn't see as much usage for Njoku. But who's to say that that wasn't purely a Flacco thing? You know, maybe David had something going on that we weren't privy to. Maybe there was some offensive scheme change that Kevin used with Flacco, and hey, that works. I'm going to use it with Deshaun next year. There's still so many questions about the variables that contributed to that difference that it's easy to give it, you know, a Flacco on off split. But, you know, at the end of the day, Njoku, he's a first round pick. You know, he's a very, very talented tight end. And let me give you some of the names that are going before David in drafts already for fantasy football. So Sam Laporta has already taken over Travis Kelce as the top drafted tight end in fantasy football. It's incredible. It's here. We're living in that world. You know,
Laporta world. Yes.
Laporta world. Exactly. So you got Trey McBride is your tight end 3, which, you know, he had a great, you know, surgeons at the back half of the year once, you know, Zach Ertz went down and Kyler Murray came back. But a couple tight ends that I question is, you know, you got Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo, who he had a nice rookie season, but there's still a lot more meat left on the bone. And I wouldn't put it past Buffalo bringing in a first round wide receiver this year in the draft, considering how many talents there are. You have Kyle Pitts at tight end 6. Now, listen, I love Kyle with the addition of Kirk Cousins. You know, it's great for him, Drake London, to Bijan, but it's still like I have to see it type of thing.
We've been waiting, right? That's the thing with Kyle Pitts and new coaching staff. I'm totally with you. Like, it's there. It almost kind of feels, and he came in so young, like Njoku, almost kind of feels like that same sort of story. Like, wow, it's all there, but we just haven't seen it yet. So maybe, you know, a vet like Kirk Cousins will help that.
Yeah, and the craziest thing is Brock Bowers, a rookie, is going one spot in front of David Njoku. And now I'm talking
We
about
don't even
just
know where he is.
yeah, exactly. We don't even know where he is. And now I'm just talking about pure tight end rankings. But when you talk about overall ADP, David Njoku is like an 8th round selection right now, which means
Oh,
that
wow.
you've already filled out your starting roster, and he's like literally the last starter that you're drafting. So I think David Njoku holds good value, but it's going to be something interesting to see as we progress throughout the summer. If Brock Bowers becomes, a top 10 draft pick, which I think he will, and he lands, on the Chargers or somewhere like that, where he automatically has a big role, we can see him move up the board. And, it's very fluid, but I think right now David Njoku presents a very good value for fantasy football.
That's a sensational value if you get him 8th round, like you said, your last kind of starter role on your fantasy team with the upside, with how he ended. I like what you said there too, Dan. It might not all be because of Flacco and Stefanski, 2-time coach of the year. The guy's pretty smart, right? We got to give him some credit. And when you see what Njoku was able to do, and remember, once that he had that burn, that accident, it really just changed his life. He's talked about it.
It lit the fire in him, is what it did.
It did. It literally and figuratively. It did, and he went off. And so now what we look at, of course, is Ken Dorsey coming in, and what's the look? Okay, well, we're going to see a lot more shotgun. We're going to see a lot more passing, a lot more running around, which should help a Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper, a David Njoku. For Cooper, fantasy-wise, and again, like you said, it's so early. We haven't seen the guys with pads, whatever, on. I would still put Cooper right now ahead of Jeudy fantasy-wise as well. Is that fair to say? Like the change of the guard could happen, but
no, I agree. And if you look at the underdog ADPs, that reflects it, because currently Amari Cooper is wide receiver 29, okay. Jerry Jeudy is wide receiver 57. So we're talking about multiple 5-6 rounds after Cooper gets selected, Jeudy gets drafted. That is all projection, obviously, because we haven't seen Jerry Jeudy in this offense. We haven't seen him on this team. And let's be honest, like his time in Denver didn't end on the best note. Now, that whole situation was a mess to begin with, Russell Wilson, Sean Payton and everything. But, we talked about Kyle Pitts and it's a projection of we know the talent is there. We want to see it. Jerry Jeudy, it's not much of a different, type of analysis. We know the talent is there. He's a 1st-round draft pick wide receiver, very decorated career to Alabama, but we're still waiting for that, true NFL breakout to happen. So, Jeudy is a projection, and I would still, if I had to choose between the two, Amari Cooper is the much, much safer thing to go with as far as drafting for fantasy football goes.
Right, and Jerry Jeudy can be one of those guys you pick up in a later round in your draft, and you see. And if it's kind of like, I still think his upside is greater than Elijah Moore was coming in last year, but similar situation, you grab him and you wait. Doesn't work out.
Yeah.
All right. If it does, cool. You got a star wide receiver at a cheap rate. So interesting with the uptick in what should be a much higher volume of a passing game. In conversation with Dan Toomey from Dynasty Nerds. So Dan, let's talk about some other news that came out of the owners' meetings, and that was from Andrew Berry saying that Nick Chubb is on pace to start running loaded running, load-bearing running, whatever it is, essentially up his workout, up his rehab. Nick Chubb's camp has said, look, he wants to be ready for September. The Browns have been a little more cautious and said, all right, either October or at some point this season, and we think maybe October-ish. They've certainly added to the roster like they want to wait and see, with Donta Foreman coming in, as well as Nyheim Hines. Nick Chubb, we know how good he was. We love him. But fantasy football, you can't be loyal, Dan, right? You can't be loyal. What do we do with Nick Chubb in fantasy this year with these unknowns?
So first, let's think about how Cleveland is viewing Nick Chubb and his role in this team this year.
Right.
Let's be honest. It's playoffs is now the standard. If we don't make the playoffs, then the season is a failure. So that is our starting point. Is we're getting to the playoffs and we're going to see how it goes. Does Nick Chubb playing in September help us make the playoffs? No. We want Nick to be fully, because think about when is Nick the best? Nick is the best in the 4th quarter when everybody's been playing a full game, they're worn down, and Nick, he prides himself on his physique and like his athleticism and how in shape he is. Carry 24, carry 25. He's still, gaining 4, 5, 6 yards a carry and knocking people over. And that's where the Cleveland Browns need Nick Chubb is in the fourth quarter, when the defense is worn down to be, the closer to seal the game. And for that to be most effective, he has to be at his most effective, which means they're going to give him as much time as humanly possible. I think we have the schedule release coming up in May. I think it'll be very interesting to see where Cleveland's bye week falls this year.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised to see, say it's a week 6, 7 bye. I wouldn't be surprised if they say like, hey, Nick, listen, we're just putting the deadline in stone. After the bye week, you're coming back. I wouldn't be surprised we saw them come out in the media and say that right away, just to spearhead, like, listen, this is the guy until the bye week, and then Nick is the guy. So kind of like give you a clear, defined picture of that. Currently, Nick Chubb is going off as running back 24. Interestingly enough, he is right between Najee Harris at RB 23, and at RB 25 is the other Steeler running back, Jalen Warren. So it seems like the fantasy people can't make a decision on what's going on in Pittsburgh. So
right.
And he's like going in that like 8th, 9th round, which means that you've drafted all of your starters and he's your first bench player. Now, if you can add a Nick Chubb to your bench to have him for that fantasy playoff push, God bless. That's amazing. That's going to be super because he's going to be a dominant force down the stretch. But do not go reaching for Nick Chubb over a starting player, because then you won't even be in the running for the playoffs when Nick comes back. So
yeah,
it's a very type of thing where if you are able to capitalize on him as a value, that'd be great. Or even if you trade for him, say somebody reaches for a Nick in the 6th round because they've heard good reports during training camp, during preseason, that, hey, he might be back earlier. That person might whiff on that pick, and they're sitting there in November and they need to make a trade, and you can get Nick Chubb on the cheap,
Right.
So for me personally, when it comes to August and I'm doing my fantasy football drafts, Nick Chubb is kind of off the board for me unless I'm getting into like the 9th, 10th round. Just because, you really need to win 4 or 5 games the first 6, 7 weeks of the season to stay alive and be in the hunt for the fantasy football playoffs. So I think I might be off of Nick this year, but if there's the opportunity to trade for him at some point, it's going to be a must-do move when it comes to the fantasy trade deadline.
Right. Yeah, you park him, and just like for the Browns, your fantasy, he'll help you for a playoff push, whatever that looks like at that time in the Brown season. Because if you have a committee that's rolling, where do you mix in? And really, the unknown of that is you bring in Nick Chubb. Is he going to be getting 25 carries a game right away? Doubtful. You're going to be mixing him in. So it's that easing him back in as well. So I'm totally with you. Any other Brown, it just seems like it's real life wise. I like the combo of Ford, of Strong, of Hines, also with the kick and punt return option, and with Donta Foreman for a goal line kind of power guy. I like the real life value, but fantasy wise, are we touching anybody here? This is just a committee schmoz.
Yeah, it's a committee. Also, I'm not surprised if they bring in somebody during the draft. We haven't done any draft talk with each other, but this running back class it's not the best. There's no Bijan going in the first round, but late day 2, early day 3, there's going to be a ton of talented players that Andrew Berry can take advantage of drafting with not having to invest a ton of draft capital, considering how limited our draft capital is this year. Yeah,
I've been bringing up. I like a guy, Ray Davis out of Kentucky. Donta Foreman sort of filled that role for this year, but power guy that you can probably get in the 6th round. Boy, he is just made for a committee. Just real life. Again, fantasy wise, nothing, but that's a one. If we could get a running back late, that's one I would like to have. So, all right, we got the running backs. We have the wide receivers. Now, the one key piece, Dan, as we know, is Deshaun Watson. This is year 3 of this mega contract. He knows it. The world knows it. And we are one failed year away from this taking over Russell Wilson as the worst contract trade in NFL history. Let's take a fandom step back for a moment and look at it fantasy-wise. Deshaun Watson flashed really hard right before that injury. That second half of the Baltimore game, we've talked about it. And it's just like, oh, yeah, now we're rolling. And then the injury, and then the surgery. And now we're going through a new offensive coordinator. fantasy football world, where are you at with Deshaun Watson?
So the good news with Deshaun Watson is, assuming you play in a single quarterback league, you don't have to draft him. On Underdog, he's going as quarterback 24. He's slotted right in between the likes of Baker Mayfield, Will Levis, Geno Smith, and even rookie Drake May. If you're playing in a standard 12-team league, you each only have one quarterback. Most people don't draft a backup quarterback this early. Deshaun Watson is not even being drafted. So if you're a big Cleveland Browns fan, you're going to get Deshaun Watson in your fantasy drafts, but he will be your second quarterback. If you draft him as your first quarterback, you're in for a rough time.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people nowadays, they play in a superflex league, where you have the ability to start a second quarterback in your superflex slot. And that's kind of the most optimal way to play, is to have two quarterbacks. In that case, Deshaun Watson is going to be one of the last drafted quarterbacks because you're going to want two of them. I'm still off on Deshaun at the moment.
Yeah.
I would like to see his progress when it comes to, optional training exercises, camp, like all that stuff. I want to see how he's doing. I know there's those videos on social media of him and David down in Texas, throwing and stuff like that. And they look great, but it was also in like my backyard. So me and my dog, we could throw balls like,
yeah. Those mean nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was not just the shoulder. It was like a lot of injuries last year. It wasn't just the shoulder. So I want to see that he comes back from that. And then, like, he was coming back from rust from not playing. And now he's going to be coming back from rust from the shoulder injury. And just like, we're going to rename him Rust. That's going to be his name, Deshaun Rust Watson, because that's all.
Russ Wilson and Rust. We got Rust and Rust.
Exactly. So for fantasy football purposes, I am off on Deshaun Watson. If we get into the middle of the season and you're playing the matchup game and he's playing, some team that has a terrible defense and it's going to be a shootout, then yes, I like Deshaun as like, a weekly flyer type of thing.
Sure.
But if you're basing your fantasy football strategy around drafting Deshaun Watson, I think you're going to be in for a bad time in 2024.
Right. Yeah. And Dan, this is one thing you try to avoid so often in fantasy football is guessing, right? It is guessing in the unknown. And truly, it is a guess to think what Deshaun Watson can do. We can hope, as Browns fans, we hope. I hope he comes off, throws for 5,000 yards, runs around healthy as anything. Is it going to happen? Hell if I know. Like, we don't know, and we have nothing to base it on in any sort of recency. Nothing.
Exactly. There's been maybe two games in his history as a Brown that we could point to, and like, I'm not saying like from a winning quarter, like from a fantasy football performance, like, oh, that was a great fantasy football performance. Even some of his wins last year, he was throwing for 180 yards and one touchdown, maybe. Like, as Cleveland Browns fans, we loved it because you let Nick do his thing or whatever. But from fantasy football purposes, that's not moving the needle for you.
No, and really not even full good games from real life or fantasy wise. It was the second half. I was at that Tennessee game with the win. I still can picture the beautiful pass to Cooper and Ford. Gorgeous. But that was the second half. First half, he didn't look good. Baltimore, terrible first half. Came back. Second, that's good. But we haven't even seen the full game. So we don't know. And everything is predicated on him coming back. And the Browns have put every resource. There are no excuses for Deshaun Watson. And the Russ thing, I don't even think that can fly anymore, because we saw Joe Flacco come off his couch after 11 months off and ball out. So the Russ thing, no. So this guy's got to come out. I want day one. I don't know what the heck the glenoid bone is or how it affects your throw. I don't know. I've never heard of it before. But I know he's going to start throwing. Kevin Stefanski said they expect him to be throwing and doing everything in April with the team. But Dan, this is the year. If this doesn't work this year, you got Jameis Winston, who, he's fun on social, but we've seen him recently too. Tyler Huntley can't throw.
The best part about Jameis is he's just a younger Joe Flacco. It's going to be the Joe Flacco experience 2.0.
Throwing it all over.
Remix for 2024 with a little bit more pizzazz.
A little bit more energy. Yeah.
It's the same type of player. He's going to drop back, moonball, and you never know what you're going to get,
Hope for the best.
Hope for the best. God bless.
I'd hope for the best. It really comes down to that. And that's with everything else being ready, that's the biggest concern. If this works, we could be talking Super Bowl. If it doesn't, Oh boy, I don't even want to think about that right now. That's
Well, the good news is 2025, we have our first round pick again. So
hallelujah. Finally. Yeah. Last thing for you, Dan. At number 54 this year, Browns' first pick. We talked about all the wide receivers. If it's me, as long as there should still be really good ones, boy, I got a list of 3, 4, 5 guys I would love to take at 54. And this is a spot. You said it. Every year you get star power coming up. Well, it's time for the Browns to hit on one. You got the trade part, but you have to get those cheap rookie deals. It's 54 if the right wide receiver's there. Is that where you're going?
No, this is actually kind of a I don't know if it's a hot take around Browns fans, but I think it's time we draft a guard. I love Joel. He's he's had a great career, but you think back to last year, he missed some time. And let's be honest, he's 33 years old, and he's already been talking about I don't know how much time I have left. How much of a big Bill Callahan fan I was. Losing him to the Titans was probably the worst part of this offseason. Yeah. So now we lost that, we lost that magic touch of being able to develop offensive linemen. I don't know if the new offensive line coach, if he, learned enough from Callahan to do the same thing, but we're at the point where we need to start investing in the offensive line now and future-proof that position. So my pick in the second round, if he's there, would be Christian Haynes, the guard from the University of Connecticut. He is, I think about our guards, the Bash brothers, think about a highlight. Yeah. What is it? It's one of them pulling and pancaking, and the Nick breaks out. Christian Haynes, even though he's a big boy, he's got the feet, he's got the legs, he can move, he can get out in space, and pull for the zone running scheme. So I really like that. The only problem is he's 23, and we know Andrew Berry, he sticks away from the older prospects. The older guys. So a couple of the names is I would also like to attack the defensive line. We saw what happened last year. We got Miles some help, bringing in Za'Darius. Thank God we brought Za'Darius back. Yeah. But, these are still kind of 1 year type of deals. So we need to refresh that cycle of getting Miles help. He finally won Defensive Player of the Year because we got him the help he needs. Mm-hmm. Let's continue that. So we got, 2 defensive ends. We got Braylon Trice out of the University of Washington. We got Jonah Ellis from the University of Utah. Those are 2 guys that'll probably be there in the second round. It's funny because I was reading a scouting report on Braylon Trice earlier today, and I was talking about how, he doesn't always necessarily have the sack numbers, but he always has a high pressure rate. And I was reading that. I'm like, oh man, who does that sound like?
Darius Smith.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, perfect, younger, cheaper. So I think defense is the move we're going to make when it comes to the second round. If I was choosing, or I would start investing in the guard position, kind of, get ahead of the curve for when, Bitonio eventually does move on from Cleveland and retires. Interesting.
And I guess the Jerry Jeudy move gives Barry at least some wiggle room. If you didn't get Jeudy, you had to go receiver.
Yeah, but that bringing Jerry Jeudy in changed completely. Right. In my opinion, that took wide receiver off the board in the second round. When people talk about us having the most complete roster in the NFL, you and I know the most complete roster talk is always one injury away from being, Fugazi.
Absolutely. I think if the right guy is there, they could still go wide receiver, but it takes the pressure off to do something like you said. A guard, which people would not be excited about, but hey, it works.
There would be pandemonium in the streets if that draft select. I think I might be the only Cleveland Browns fan happy about that one.
We are going to clip this and see on draft night. We'll see what happens at that 54 pick. Dan, tell people where they can find you. All your great work. You're doing some great stuff.
Oh, all right. So I actually started a new project with my co-host of Dynasty Nerds, Tim. So we are running the Banners Fly Forever football show. You can find our YouTube channel. Just search Banners Fly Forever Football. We'll pop up right away. Find us on Twitter, TikTok, all the social media stuff. I'm a new dad. He's got a kid on the way. So the timing with Dynasty Nerds, it involves a lot. So, we're doing our own thing, kind of our own schedule. So we're happy for any support that we could get because we're a brand new project.
Excellent. Well, I've checked it out. You guys, listeners, viewers, check this project out from Dan. Great stuff, buddy. Well, let's chat again before and then after the draft.
Yes, definitely. Appreciate it, Andy.
All right. There he goes. Dan Toomey from Dynasty Nerds. Interesting thoughts on what the Browns should do at 54. Not wide receiver. And again, like I said, the addition of Jerry Jeudy makes it so Andrew Berry does not have to go wide receiver. If you got an Adonai Mitchell sitting there, I still think he had too good of a combine. He'll go. If you have the right guy staring you in the face, I think you got to take him. Again, get those cheaper wide receiver contracts. But to Dan's point, if it's someone you think, okay, or I can get someone similar in the third round. Remember, the Browns are going to need more wide receivers, right? The days of the 3 tight end are gone. The Giovanni Ricci guy they brought in is essentially an extra lineman. There's like 5 career catches or something. So Harrison Bryant's not there. It's Njoku and you got Akins, but you're going to need some more wide receivers and younger and cheaper. I still think that's a good move, but then he's right. At guard, you got to start back channeling things. You brought back Michael Dunn year. We love Michael Dunn. Brought in a couple extra kind of fill in the gap pieces, but that young guy contract. You got Whippler at for center out of Ohio State from last year. So that'd be interesting. And on that D line, not a tackle, but an edge rusher if the right one falls. Can never have too many of those in the rotation, as we know. So I want to know from you guys, okay? Who do you want the Browns, either who or what position do you want the Browns to draft at 54? What do you think these Browns players will do in fantasy football? Where do you want to be drafting your Jerry Jeudy, your Deshaun Watson, your Nick Chubb, David Njoku? Where are you taking these guys? Do you want them? Do you not? And then, of course, the stadium issue and news coming out about Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry getting imminent contract extensions. And that stadium. Do you want the $1 billion refurbishment down at the lakefront? So as is open air and they'll redo whatever. Or new indoor facility, warm and cozy in the wintertime at Brook Park, not downtown. Let me know in the comments. Subscribe, like, follow on Twitter at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81, Instagram and TikTok at AndyMCSports as well. So big thanks to Dan Toomey. Thanks to the Sick Podcast team. And you know what? The draft is coming right around. So we will see you next week for more Brown Stock right here on the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.